discussed on this podcast are determined by the Justice Coordinating Commission of the Sisters of Providence of St. Mary of the Woods, Indiana. Guest opinions do not necessarily reflect those of the Sisters of Providence. To learn more, go to www.spsmw.org. Welcome to JUSTUs, where we talk about creating an equitable human community and influencing change. Through shared stories, conversation, and inspiration, we will learn how you can make a difference in your community. I am your host, Susie Ray, Providence Associate. In today's episode, I would like to introduce our guest, Grecia Lozano, who is co-founder and executive director of a nonprofit organization called Latino Voices. She is joining us in this shared space today to discuss immigrants, ICE, and how it's affecting communities in Minnesota. Motivated by Grecia's experiences and insights, let's take action for the common good. And as Carrie Newcomer says in her song, "If not now, tell me when." Good morning, Grecia. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I know that you have been extremely busy helping people within our community here in the state of Minnesota. Can you share with our listeners background and a little bit about the mission of your nonprofit organization, Latino Voices?
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. Yes, it's been extremely busy the last 2 months, but I'm always happy to take a little time off just to share a little bit about our organization, our mission and vision, and why we do what we do. Our organization really started as a grassroots a little bit before COVID, understanding that there's a lot of new families that come to our city that really don't understand the processes. And although the name Latino is in the organization, we really do focus a lot on the migrant and the migrant experience. So although we certainly help a lot of Latinos from all over the country, we really do focus on the experience of the migrant communities. So our focus is to help these families who are new, who don't have the experience or the background or the family ties, to help them with anything from like applying to services through the county, or finding assistance for rental, to just connecting with community resources like the library. How do you get a library card? Where do you go to get food from the food pantry? Where do you take your kids to school? It's little things like that that make day-to-day life that you can take for granted if you grew up in this city, in this environment, in this country, and it kind of becomes second nature to you. Like, when is it appropriate to get a driver's license or your child's passport, and how do you do that? That's kind of second nature. But for a lot of migrants that don't know, that could become really difficult. So that's really where this was born out of. It was really connecting people who might not be able to get to those resources, to the resources that exist, and making it easier and more manageable. And although language can be a barrier, it's not always the only barrier. There are a lot of people that speak English, but if you try reading a letter from, I don't know, the Department of Health and Human Services, that looks like it's Chinese, even though it's English. It's not as plain as you think. So our specialty is not just translating, but being able to decipher those things and truly make families understand what those processes are. So that the idea came from our own experiences. I come from a migrant family myself, and just growing up with a community that surrounded us. As I learned processes, my mom kind of threw me under the bus and was always telling me, like my coworker has an issue with their landlord. Do you think you can go in and translate? And then in that process of translating, I would learn a lot of things like, oh, that's written on the lease. Okay, what is a lease? What does that explain? When do you sign that? How long is that for? What are your responsibilities, and what are your rights as a tenant? So little things like that then started teaching me some of the skills that I now have to be able to support that. And then as the needs grew and the organization grew, so did the team. Now we are a team of 4. We have 2 excellent case managers who carry their heart in their sleeve. They're the most empathetic, but also the most helpful and knowledgeable. I mean, these girls, then they will go to bat for you. They will find you all the answers in the world. If they need to spend hours investigating on how to find a process, they will. And I always tell them, I would not be able to run this organization without the work that you do because you keep it going. I might be doing the executive stuff and I might be, doing the presentations and all of this other stuff, but the day to day, that's where it goes. And all of us have a migrant experience. One of our case managers is an American citizen. She was born here, but her family is migrant. And so she has that migrant background as well of like growing up with a family that didn't know how to navigate these systems. And so for her, it's also important that families whose children are born in the US still have access to these things because it's not a given. Just because you're second generation, it doesn't mean you have all the answers. So yeah, that's us.
It's vital work and it's so important. And I think one of the points that you make, we do take it for granted, right? On all the different forms and applications and the things just to get through day by day.
And I remember for me, one of the experiences that really marked it was starting college. I come from a background where both of my parents are college educated. Both my mother and my father went to college. They both have their careers. My mom is a registered surgical nurse in her own country, and my father is a mechanical engineer. So they both went through college, they both went through the process. But when I was in high school and I needed to go through my own college process, my mom was always like, well, you just walk in, you take your admissions exam, you pay your fee, and you're all set to go. And the reality hit when I was like, okay, wait, that's not what I'm hearing. I need to talk to more people. My counselor was like, how many applications have you made? I'm like, what do you mean how many applications? I just walk into the college and submit my admissions and pay my fee and I'm good to go. So it was a little bit of a culture shock, again, from very highly educated people who in their own country would have been able to navigate me through the process. Coming to a country where the process is completely different, it took us for a loop. And she was like, okay, we need to take a step back and we need to get some help and support to understand what the process is like. And I think that's stark reality of like, it's supposed to be the same, right? The college education is supposed to be the same, but the process to get there was completely different between one generation and the next as soon as you cross a border. So that was when I was like, okay, we really need to explore a little more on this and support families because if again my highly educated parents were not able to support me with that, I can't imagine parents who are trying to get their kids through even high school and not understanding GPAs and not understanding just basic again things that you take for granted like selecting your classes, coursework for college because to them it really is foreign.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to kind of turn the page now to today in our state of Minnesota. Yeah, that's a heavy sigh. Could you paint a picture for our listeners on what life is like day to day within our Minnesota communities?
Yeah, especially for the migrant communities, I think no person of color feels safe right now. And that honestly seems like an understatement. Everybody feels targeted, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from, no matter what their immigration status is. The stark reality is that people are being persecuted by the color of their skin. And we've seen it over and over. There are plenty of people who are American citizens, second, third, even fourth generations, born here, their parents born here, their grandparents born here, that have to literally carry their passport. That's not something that you think about. I mean, how many of you leave home thinking, wallet, keys, passport? Of course you don't, because you're not traveling outside of the country. So for our children to have to walk around and think, oh, I can't forget my passport, because the difference is not, I'm going to get a ticket for no license. It's, I'm going to get detained. I'm going to get held up in a detention center, God knows where. And I could potentially be deported to a place I don't even know, just because somebody thought that I was too dark for this country. One of the things we've seen more often is Native Americans being detained because Native Americans resemble a lot of Latinos. And so they're, again, being detained. And because they don't carry a passport, They're taken into a detention center and the process gets started. And it's really difficult for families to feel safe. I think fear is what's guiding our community right now. People are afraid to even look outside their window. Children are not attending school. Children are afraid of even getting on the bus. Parents are afraid of even calling the school to report their kids being gone because that might be something that could jeopardize their safety. Um, Teachers are secretly coming into families' homes to drop off homework for kids so that they're not behind in school. Parents are not able to go to work. There's detention spots. They're in the highly targeted neighborhoods. There are check spots, check areas, or checkpoints where agents will stop anyone leaving that space and ask them for the documentation. And you would say, if you have nothing to hide, then you're totally fine. The reality is that some of us were not prepared for this because we weren't thinking that this was going to happen. So my daughter, who is 14 years old, has never left the country because we haven't needed to, and um, it was for her a rite of passage to get her passport so she could travel abroad this summer. It was going to be a birthday present, and we were going to make a whole thing out of it. And now, so I don't have her passport, and so now I have to get it expedited. And I'm afraid. I'm afraid of her walking down to the bus stop by herself because she doesn't have anything other than her school ID to prove that she is who she is. And so any ICE agent could stop by and say, and I was just telling her the other day, it's not a nice, friendly questionnaire that they're gonna do, where they're gonna be stopping you and asking, "Hey, little girl, are you a U.S. citizen?" These guys are rough. They are aggressive. Their intimidation tactics are very scary. And if you're a 13-year-old child, if you're a 5-year-old little kid, of course you're gonna get scared, even if you have nothing to fear. So for people to say if you're illegal here, you have nothing to fear, that's not true. Our kids have a lot to fear. Our kids are going to school finding that their classmates have been detained and deported. Our kids are going to school being followed by ICE agents on the bus. Our kids are going to school thinking, if when I come home, are my parents going to be there? Are my grandparents going to be there? These kids are going to school thinking, okay, if my parents aren't home, what is my next step? So it's irrational to think that these kids are going to be able to succeed in school. I can anticipate GPAs are going to drop. I can anticipate, and there's absolutely nothing we can do. These kids and their mental health, they have priorities, and their priority is not whether they're going to pass their social studies test. It's whether they're going to survive what they're studying in their social studies test. My daughter's in ninth grade, and their social studies section right now is Auschwitz and the Holocaust and the Gestapo. And for her to read these stories as she's living in a community that's targeted in the very same way is so difficult. She hasn't
Mm.
even started her essay. And she says, I'm just putting it off. I'm not ready to start it. But I also know that in the back of her mind is like, okay, now I have to think about this in the reality that I'm living. And it's impossible for these kids to be mentally okay with everything that's happening. And again, you could be second, third, fourth generation, but I can guarantee you that if you stop a child of color, they will tell you that at least one person in their life has been affected directly by ICE presence in our state. And that's very difficult to process for children and for their caregivers. I mean, you really are limited to what you can provide. So, again, parents aren't going to work. They're losing their employments because they can't make it to work. They can't leave their places. Now there's different tactics that are being used by ICE agents, including impersonating Ubers and Lyfts,
Mm.
including raiding places of work, including raiding places of worship. I mean, no space is safe except for home. And unfortunately, we're also seeing now that we're hitting month two of the administration's presence in Minnesota, we're approaching a lot of people at risk of eviction. And so the only place that was their safe haven, which was home, is now at risk. And so then the conversation in the homeless prevention centers and the conversation at the county levels is, what are we going to do? Because the one place that was safest for these families is now under jeopardy. So they get evicted, and then what? And then they're out in the streets, ready to be poached, ready to be taken away, ready to be detained, ready to be kidnapped. And unfortunately, this process is so chaotic that people get lost. I have heard of American citizens who get detained, and of course, their parents are like, "Oh, that's my child. I have their passport. I have all their documentation. I'm gonna go over to the detention center and get them out." And they call the detention center, and the detention center has no idea where they are. They don't know which detention center they went to. They don't know which officer detained them. They don't know where their location is, where the family can present themselves so they can get picked up. And this is, again, it's not just affecting undocumented immigrants, it's affecting every single person of color that lives in our country, in our state.
Every time I talk to somebody and even just listening to you, I'm just speechless. I mean, and it makes me so angry. One of the things that I noticed, even though I don't have kids in school, is going down to a courthouse and finding a car where the driver's windows totally out, but smashed in. The car's just sitting on the side by a road and a sidewalk. I mean, it's not even parked legally. Nobody's attending it. What happens to these vehicles? Do you know what they're doing with all these vehicles?
Our community is so resilient. Our community has this sense of surviving and supporting one another, that has been one of the very first things that came out of this. As people are getting detained and their cars are getting, I mean, this literally is an abduction that you'd see in a third world country.
Yeah.
The people get boxed in, they get detained. ICE agents are breaking windows and literally pulling people out of their vehicles. They have the most ruthless force, and then the vehicles are left out there. So the communities have created lots of various groups in which they communicate with their neighborhoods and with their neighbors. So I'm going to try to paint you a picture. I'm driving down the road and I'm seeing a vehicle and I'm witnessing that someone is detained. I have taken an observer training. I am recording everything that's happening. Usually, observers are trained to ask the person that's being detained what their name and birth date is so that they can have posteriority to identify that person. So then the person, as they're literally being detained, they're screaming their name and they're screaming their birth date, and sometimes they even scream the name of someone that they can get a hold of or that they need to, like, their emergency contact. So then these videos are posted all over these groups: Facebook, WhatsApp, Signal. Every single group that you can think of has some kind of network, and I've seen these videos much more than I should daily. And it's, this person was arrested in this corner at this street, and their vehicle is still here. So then the family contacts, there's a list of towing companies that are willing to do it for free.
Oh, wow.
So then
That's awesome.
the families contact one of these towing companies, and we've got a list, depending on the city that you're living in, we've got a list of towing companies that are willing to do this for free to get the vehicle back into their homes or their apartment buildings, somewhere that it's safe until the family figures out what to do. Unfortunately, what their next step is selling the car so that they can get bail money, so that they can go and pay a lawyer to see if they can at least get that person out of the detention center until they have due process. How often does that happen? I mean, I've been seeing, it's so sad to see all kinds of things being sold on Facebook for a dime. A dime a penny. I swear to God, it's vehicles, it's properties, it's jewelry, it's shoes, anything that people can sell, anything that has value to them. They're selling out so that for anything that they can get, so that they can have enough money to pay for a lawyer, so that they can have enough money to pay for bail if the family makes bail. And then so that's one part of the process. And again, the other part of the process is figuring out what that family member is, figuring out
Yeah.
which detention center they ended up in, figuring out whether they're given due process or if it's too late and they're already in Texas.
So one of the other questions I wanted to ask you was, with over 3,000 ICE agents on the ground every day here, how has it really affected our local businesses? Do you have some examples of some local ones that?
Yeah. So there's two sides of this coin. There's the small Latino business owners or the small migrant business owners, and again, this goes across every type of migrant, right? Migrant business owners are struggling. They're struggling to keep their places open. Sometimes they're even afraid to go and open the spaces. I mean, I've got a couple of business owners who were like, I can't leave the house, so I can't go open the restaurant. I can't leave the house, so I can't go open the store. Also, the people that they employ are afraid of going in, so they don't have enough employers. I have a couple of friends who are small business owners, and talking to one of them, we were discussing this. We were just having this conversation a few days ago when we had that massive storm and then the sub-zero weather. And
Yeah.
he's like, "Do you know why the roads are the way they are? Because we can't get enough people. We can't get crew members that can come in because the people who are willing to do this are not afraid of leaving home because immigration agents are stopping plow trucks. They're stopping them, they're boxing them in, they're asking people for their documents. And of course, again, are you going to carry all of your documentation when you're working at 3 in the morning cleaning snow? Probably not, especially the first couple of weeks. So they were literally detaining people as they were providing a service in the community. So now people are afraid of leaving. So now we have high demand of jobs that were done by migrants, predominantly by migrants, that is not being filled. And then on top of that, we have small businesses that are not only struggling, but are afraid. And it's not just, struggling financially, but they're afraid of providing services because they're being targeted. It's not only that the people who used to go there to shop or to eat are not attending anymore, but ICE agents are literally walking into the stores. They're walking into the restaurants and they're asking their patrons for their documentation. So of course people are afraid to even go to the store. They're afraid to go into a restaurant. So the industries all over the state are struggling to stay afloat. And if you're not a small Latino business owner, but if you're a restaurant owner, if you are again a landscape company, if you all of these companies depend on the labor of immigrants. If you order DoorDash, it's probably going to take 4 times longer than it used to 2 months ago. Walmart is no longer doing deliveries because all of their deliverers were Hispanic migrants. And it's sad because it's not necessarily that these Hispanic migrants were undocumented. They had to have a work permit to be able to apply to these places. But now they're being targeted regardless of what their immigration status is. They're being targeted so people don't want to take that risk. They would rather stay home and tough it out and stay with their families than be separated. Because I was talking to a friend the other day, and she's like, my husband doesn't want us to leave the house at all by ourselves. He wants to make sure that we're always together, us two and our two kids. Because if we get detained, we all get detained together. And I said, honey, if you think that once you get detained, you're going to stay together, you've got another thing coming. Because your husband is a male, he's going to be in a detention center separate from you, and your children are minors, and they're going to be in a detention center separate from you. There is no way they're going to keep you all together. And you're not going to make it to your home country tomorrow, or in a week, or even in a month. There are people who have been in detention centers for months. So the fact that you travel together does not give you safety. So people are afraid of even leaving their homes for any reason. So I can anticipate, I mean, if you visit a grocery store, you can already see it. There's less people working, there's less products on the shelves. We're already seeing how California's Target during, I think it was October, November, when California was being targeted, that affected the economy. That definitely affected our agriculture and what's available on our shelves. We're already seeing that here too. We're already
Yeah.
seeing prices skyrocket. We're already seeing there's a higher demand and a lower supply. And we're already seeing that things are getting pricier because we just don't have the capacity. We've seen small businesses and local restaurants shut down for the past, I think, 3 weeks.
Mhm.
At least 3 to 4 restaurants in our small town have shut down due to a lack of people being able to come into work. We've got 2 people in the entire restaurant running the kitchen, one person waiting for the entire restaurant. I mean, it's impossible. It's impossible.
I'm basically speechless. I mean, you try to consume all this and it's hard to even think about what's going on. Another area, Gracie, I wanted to attack is the handful of DACA recipients that I've seen on reels that I've been watching, where they're actually self-deporting themselves back to towns that they haven't been since their childhood. Do you know how DACA recipients are being affected?
I think DACA is probably one of the most um, murky gray areas that exist in this entire system because DACA is a deferred action program, which means you are protected from deportation. That's exactly what it means. However, depending on the agent, depending on the day, and depending on who you are, you could find an agent that's very nice and kind to you, checks your paperwork and says you are up to date, you're good to go. Or you can find an agent that doesn't even take your paperwork. That literally says, I don't care, you're an immigrant and we're gonna detain you. So there's tons of experiences already in the US of people who should be protected and are not. They're detained. They are awaiting a process in Texas. Not even in their own state. I've got a handful of friends who I grew up with that are in that situation, and I know that they are DACA recipients, and not just DACA. I mean, I've got entire families that are picking up their children, American-born children, who have all the right to be here, all the right to an American education, all the right to being in an American system, who are picking their kids up and taking them to their home country. And there's going to be a culture shock for these kids because they're used to living in the US. This is their place of, I mean, for me, I came to the US when I was 10 years old. I am now over 30. I will not tell you the exact age, but needless to say, it's been more than half my life. This is what
Yeah.
I know. This is my home country. When people ask me where I'm from, I usually my response is I was born in Mexico, but I'm from Minnesota. You can hear it in my accent. You can see it in the way I act. You can see it in the food I eat. I mean, I'm Minnesotan through and through. You can see it when I walk in shorts in 30-degree weather, when I'm just wearing a hoodie and I don't need a jacket because it's only 25. That's how Minnesotan I am. That's how American these kids are. And so in their own country, there's going to be this massive cultural shock where they just don't fit in. And connecting back with these friends of mine and their children, they're struggling so hard to find a place. They're struggling so hard. You would think that because they're bilingual and because they're
Mhm.
American citizens, they'd be able to find an employment right away. They'd be able to find uh, better opportunities of education, better jobs. The reality is completely different because they are American citizens. However, or American citizens or grew up in America, they're discriminated against. These people are constantly under a magnifying glass, seeing where they make a mistake because they're not Mexican enough, because they're not Salvadorian enough, because they're not Hispanic enough, yet they weren't American enough to the US. And so there's this disconnect in your psyche of like, so what is my place? Where do I belong? And a lot of mental health stems from that. And you really have to have a very strong personality to not let these things define you. But when you have systems oppressing this, when you have systems telling you otherwise, and a whole community that tears you down because of this, because of things that were completely out of your control, that makes it so hard. And again, these are kids who have families. We are talking, DACA has been around for about 12 years. At that time, you had to have been at least 17. So we're adults with
Yeah.
families, with children who have to be sitting here with the crossroads of, do I stay in a country where I might not belong, but belongs very much to my child? Or do I take my child, do I take my family to a country where they have never been to face the same racism that I'm facing here? That's where we're at. So
Oh,
yeah, that's DACA.
well, thanks for that. That helps me to understand a little more and a lot of details that I guess I didn't even think about, especially when they go back to their countries and that whole self-identity of where do I belong. So how does Latino Voices help our community today with all the changes and everything all the parts and pieces that are moving every single day? How do you go about managing that?
Oof, I'd like to know that too. How have I gone to managing all that stuff? How do we survive? I think one of the things that really highlights who Latino Voices is and has been for the last couple of years is our adaptation to the needs of the community. So going back a couple of years when we started just doing case management throughout the city, and it was like we're gonna meet you at the library, we're gonna meet you here, we're gonna meet you there. Eventually, then we got an office and we started doing case management from there just to make it safer. And then the only places that were giving free resources shut down in our city. And so then we adapted and we were like, we need to open a resource center. People need to be able to have access to clothing, to shoes, to weather appropriate clothing, clothes in the winter, clothes in the summer, to personal hygiene items. So then we quickly adapted our space and changed into, okay, now we need a resource center to be able to provide resources for the community. And then when this all hit and we started hearing from people that they haven't left home, they're afraid of leaving home, and they're just wondering if we could, if someone that they knew could come by and pick up some food. So then we started a partnership with the food shelf, with the local food shelf, and we started doing deliveries out of our organization. That grew up very quick. Within 2 weeks, we went from helping 10 families to helping 50 in 2 weeks. So we were like, okay, we need to adapt. We need to change very quickly. Things are escalating and we need to find new ways. So then we did a partnership with our local food shelf and we trained. I think the first training we had over 30 volunteers. And we went through a very, very extensive training. And I mean, we were there for over an hour because I wanted the volunteers to truly understand what was at stake if they chose to volunteer with us. So for those people who are considering volunteering with us, just know that there's a very extensive training. You have to be highly vetted because the people that we're serving are very vulnerable, and we take that very seriously. We take seriously the safety of our community. Both the people that you're serving, but also the people that are doing the service, right? The people who are volunteering. We want to make sure that you're just as safe as the people that you're delivering to. So then we started doing food deliveries through the food shelf, and then hygiene deliveries through our own organization. At first, we only had a handful of things, so we put a sign out there asking the community members if they would be willing to donate some supplies so that we could get through the families that we were helping, and the community has responded enormously. So now we have an operation that goes through several places, and I'll walk you through why that happened in a little bit. So we have hygiene items coming out of our organization, and then we have food distribution coming out of our local food shelf. And then we are also training volunteers for other organizations in the area that are in neighboring cities so that their volunteers are also fully trained on how to handle certain situations, especially when it comes to delivering in areas that are very susceptible to ICE. We have been targeted several times. Our partners have been targeted several times. So we decided not to take any donations straight into our office because we didn't want ICE to be aware of where our offices are so that they didn't come and raid us, because they did that to another organization in a neighboring city. They showed up to their place of service with a warrant asking for all their documents. So we were like, okay, we need to be protective of our people. So this other, it was a small store that had a storage area, and so people were able to donate there. And we made it public. We're partnering with this store. If you have donations for us, please drop them off in there. And lo and behold, within 2 weeks, I showed there in a
Mm.
small shop owned by two small business owner who are local. They probably employ maybe two extra people, and they showed up to do an administrative checkup. Excuse me? What do you mean
Wow.
administrative checkup? We all knew. It's very clear why they did it. So now we have a different place where you can drop off stuff, where you can drop off donations. And we're not disclosing that. So if you would like to drop off donations, you have to contact us directly. And then that place, that store is going to take all the supplies to a warehouse, not to our organization, and then we shop out of that warehouse. That way there's multiple locations and we are not being followed, or none of the people who are coming from place A to place B are being followed, and there's a lot of distance between the community that's being served and the community that's doing the donations. And that's done for a reason, because we don't want to jeopardize the safety of our families and the people we're serving. So hygiene and food items is what we're doing. We're also helping people with resources. We run the communication between local observers and patrollers and the community members that are at stake. We are starting to work with schools on what are some of the partnerships that we can potentially have to ensure that kids are staying educated even if they aren't able to make it to school. So whether it's, finding alternative bus routes, finding alternative transportation, perhaps doing online schooling, and how do we notify families of that. We are also partnering with the city and the police department to figure out ways that we can help and support these families. We're connecting them with 211 and helping them kind of navigate the process of asking for rental assistance if they need it, and seeing who qualifies and who doesn't qualify. We're connecting them with health services, especially online health services, as these families aren't able to leave their homes. We are also connecting them with volunteers that can be personal shoppers, and these are people that you can contact directly so that you can get supplies. Maybe you are working from home, but you still can't leave the house. So these people can go shopping for you and come back and give you your supplies, and you can pay for that. So we are getting very creative with the things that we do. Our priority is, again, to keep these families safe and
Yeah.
to give them what they need to be able to survive over the next couple of weeks, because it'll be over soon. It'll be over soon.
Yep.
It'll be over soon.
Well, resiliency, creativity, absolutely the adjectives on how people are really navigating through all of this on a day-to-day basis.
I'm the kind of person that believes that privilege should be used, especially when we're talking about some of the things that we're experiencing. So, the setup and the network that we have created with our volunteers is, if a volunteer is able to and has the privilege to drive around without being stopped by an ICE agent, if this person has not been previously identified by ICE as friendly or as an observer, if they have not been seen as a patrol, then and it sounds awful to say the word use, but we utilize their privilege to be able to provide services for these families who aren't able to get out of their house. And the amount of families that have reached back out and expressed their gratitude, shared their blessings. I mean, they're trying to do little things like, please let them know that we're praying for them. Please let them know that, I mean, already we're seeing that they're planning full on parties. Like, once this is over, we're gonna have a full on party, and it's gonna be a potluck, and we're gonna be down at the park, and everyone who has ever done anything for us is invited. That's the level of gratitude our community is having for the people who are putting their foot forward, who are doing something about this, because we know that we cannot do this alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good segue on to my one final question for you. As part of our podcast, we always have a call to action for our listeners. And I know that this topic has definitely touched people across our country. As part of advocacy on this issue, what are some things that our listeners can do, regardless of where they live?
There's a few things that we've been doing. We do have an online donation campaign for additional supplies as we're needing them. We've received donations from as far as Kentucky, Texas, Maine. for people who are seeing, what is happening, and they want to do something. So we are able to use those funds to replenish whatever our highest needs are. We have, I don't think I've mentioned this, last night was our cutoff for, or Sunday was our cutoff for this week's distribution, and we were at 180 families. I just added our numbers yesterday, and we were at 194
Wow.
families, not individuals. So the need is huge. And obviously, with that huge need, we need volunteers. We need volunteers who can deliver these goods. We need volunteers who can be on the lookout. We need volunteers that are willing to check the bus stops, make sure that the kids are getting home safe, that they're not being scouted, that they're not being used as bait. We need volunteers that can be observers. If you can take a full-on training and become a trained observer, so that you know what steps to take to document when somebody is being detained, to make it easier for their family members to be able to get them out. We need supplies. Our food shelf, I mean, we are going to the food shelf every week for different families, and the shelves are getting cleared out. And I know our local food shelf is, but I also know that every other local food shelf is as well. So that's start there, and then additionally, take the government. I can't say that enough. Change is just around the corner with the elections coming up. Really, really be objective to who you're putting into places of positions of power. Really be really objective on grinding these people on where they stand. Um, Figure out what they're saying. I saw Senator Coleman put out a letter the other day, and she was calling for peace, and she said something that I'm like, if I didn't know that word, I would totally be okay with it. But she knows that word, and she knows that she's using the word detainer because to her it sounds great. It sounds like a great idea for local law enforcement to honor detainers. What they're asking for is that any person that is held for any reason can be reported to immigration and eventually be deported. And that could be, I mean, freaking traffic tickets. If you accumulate certain amount of traffic tickets and you have to go to court, they could put a detainer for that. How many of us have done that? I mean, how many of us have misdemeanors on traffic? How many of us have misdemeanors on various things that really should not put you or your family at risk? And that's what she's calling for. So really, really be careful on who you're electing, on what they're standing for. Grind them. Tell them, express clearly, where do you stand on ICE agents' presence in our cities? Where do you stand on financing ICE in our organizations or in our communities? Really know what these people are standing for and really understand what that means. Do your research, because that is what's going to make changes. We can do as much as we can on the ground level, but the reality is once we move off that ground level, we're limited. And honestly, a lot of the donations we've been receiving are with a heavy heart by community members that say, I wish I could do more. Well, now you can. Now you can do more. And that's all I'm asking for. You can do more.
Yeah, and I think that that's really helpful for our listeners because I believe ICE is going to many more communities besides just Minnesota, and they're already in a lot of communities. And so this is really valuable information to have and hold and be able to help out and volunteer, where we can. I sincerely appreciate your time with us today, Gracia. The information that you have provided us is invaluable, and I know that our listeners appreciate your lived experiences here in Minnesota. And thank you, Just Us listeners, for sharing this time and space with us today. We hope that you are inspired and have learned from Gracia and are ready to join us in the call to action. Are you now ready to make a difference within your own community? If not now, tell me when. Our producers of the Just Us podcast are Jane Fisher, Providence Associate, and myself, Susie Ray. Our co-producers are Dr. Perlette Springer and Sister Barbara Batista. We hope you enjoyed this episode and will share it with others. Please leave your comments, review, and any suggested topics at www.spsmw.org. Talk to you soon.